Well, the government doesn't have a great great track record on trade deals. It's not pursuing multilateral trade liberalisation, which is the most effective way of boosting global trade. Its deal with Japan was supported by no one in the industry, as best I can tell, and its deal with Korea allows private firms in Korea to sue the Australian government. What we're looking for from the China trade deal is a deal that's at least better than the one that the New Zealanders got. And rather than selectively leaking out details of the China negotiations, we need a full and frank briefing to the Australian people. Now, the government's daft to set itself a hard timetable like this. You imagine you were negotiating with someone to buy a car and they said, well, I've got to sell it by the end of the day. You'd strike a better deal because of that. And that's the position that this government's put us in vis-a-vis China on the latest negotiations.
Well, to extend that analogy, though, this is a car we've been looking to buy for over a decade. Isn't it good that this is being finalised?
Look, it's going to be terrific if the government can bring home a good trade deal with China, one that is better than the one that New Zealand secured with China. We're waiting to see the details, and we have a government that, again, seems addicted to secrecy. They don't want to tell us what's happening in border protection. They don't want multinationals to report on how much tax they're paying. They don't want to come clear with the Australian people about where those China trade negotiations are at. In each case, they're making a mistake. They should bring the Australian people into their confidence, and they'll find that Australians are smart, thoughtful, and will provide good ideas on all of those different policy areas.
But governments don't telegraph the details of their trade negotiations.
Well, the government is telegraphing details about the trade negotiations to selected journalists as a way of trying to bolster their standing in the opinion polls. What they're not doing is providing an overall picture to the community.
Well, I can't speak on behalf of every Australian because the agreement hasn't yet been signed, but the common element of a free trade agreement is that regardless of how the two parties may come out of the agreement, both parties are way better off than everyone else who hasn't signed one. And the obvious example here is New Zealand streaking away because they already have an agreement in place with China. So I don't want to focus too much on whether China gets a little bit more or we get a little bit less than China. In essence, it opens up enormous opportunities for Australia to deliver its capacity in aged care, health, education, architecture, and vice versa, to have much closer ties with clearly the economic leader of the second half of this century. So I want to see it happening sooner rather than later. Of course, politically, you iron out the complexities, but this is big news. And after 6 years where we barely saw a trade agreement signed under Labor, you're now seeing that a government, a coalition government that really wants to see them moving, is achieving just that in their first 12 months.
Labor said it won't issue a blank cheque. You just mentioned that you didn't see any action over the 6 years of the Rudd-Gillard government. So what level of blame should Labor shoulder for not having progressed this deal?
Oh, look, this is a week for celebration if we can pull this deal off, not for pointing fingers. I just make the obvious observation that it seemed like virtually nothing happened. I think there was one sign that was already nearly ready because of the previous coalition government, but over 6 years we were going nowhere. And I don't understand that. It'd be a good question for the Labor Party. But now we have Korea, South Korea, Japan, and hopefully China, fingers crossed. This will be a significant step. And ultimately, Andrew Robb has put it correctly. We're heading towards an Asia-Pacific free trade arrangement. And if Australia can be at the forefront of that, that is a big feather in the cap of the coalition, and Andrew Robb in particular.